Well, Crystal, this latest threat from U.S. President Donald Trump comes just 10 days from the deadline that the Canadian government was working towards to sign a new trade deal with the U.S. by July 21st. Now, in a statement from Prime Minister Mark Carney that was posted late last night, just before midnight, he says that Canada will work towards a revised deadline of August 1st.
I will reject all attempts to weaken CARE. All attempts to wear us down, to break us down so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen. Those were the words of Prime Minister Mark Carney on July 22, 2025, spoken not from a podium in Ottawa, but around a fire pit outside Huntsville, Ontario, just steps from the meeting room where Canada's premiers had gathered for one of the most consequential closed-door summits in modern Canadian history.
In Huntsville today, premiers from across Canada and Prime Minister Mark Carney gathered to talk trade negotiations with the U.S. and building our economy here at home. Carney, however, didn't sound too optimistic about reaching a favorable deal with the U.S. by August 1st.
Now, the President of the United States is trying to fundamentally restructure his economy. It means our economy, and it means the global economy as well.
And as I made clear to President Trump in our call last week, I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada, all attempts to wear us down, to break us down, so that America can own us.
And I understand and respect his goal to support American workers, but I disagree with him that this is how to help.
The timing was no accident. With just 9 days left before the Trump administration's 35% tariff hammer drops.
In a letter addressed to Prime Minister Mark Carney and posted on social media, Trump said the U.S. will charge Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian products sent into the United States.
Carney is not softening. He is hardening his position, refusing to fold, refusing to compromise, and quietly mobilizing the entire country for what could become a generational economic confrontation. But this is not just about a single tariff. This is about whether Canada, after decades of economic interdependence, finally breaks free from US trade pressure, once and for all. YouTube is not the biggest fan of content like this, but we believe people deserve to hear the truth. If you agree, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us beat the algorithm and keep going. We really appreciate the support. The crisis began weeks earlier, when the White House issued a direct ultimatum: sign a new bilateral trade agreement by August 1st, or face the full weight of a 35% tariff across all key sectors: steel, aluminum, auto parts, lumber, even agricultural machinery. The Canadian response was swift. Carney summoned every provincial premier to Huntsville for a 3-day summit. The goal? To build a national consensus before the deadline. What emerged from that summit is still unfolding, but behind the scenes, the outlines are becoming clear. Carney told his counterparts in plain terms, "We are not going to accept a bad deal. Not now, not ever. Our focus is not just on defending exports. It's on building something deeper: resilience, sovereignty, one Canadian economy."
And it's a day that has literally been decades in the making. Minister LeBlanc has just tabled our government's One Canadian Economy legislation.
That phrase, one Canadian economy, is now at the center of Carney's national strategy. Backed by premiers like Doug Ford, Danielle Smith, Francois Legault, and Tim Houston, Carney is launching an aggressive internal build-out to reduce Canadian dependence on US markets. The strategy includes a new nation-building infrastructure push, expanded port development in James Bay, rail corridors connecting critical mineral sites in the north, and a new wave of industrial investment targeting Asian buyers directly. This isn't just a policy reaction, it's a full pivot. In Ontario, Ford has pledged provincial steel for all new pipeline projects. Alberta and Saskatchewan have agreed to redirect industrial capacity to internal markets if the US tariffs proceed. Atlantic premiers are working on shared logistics corridors to make Canadian ports the preferred export hubs. Meanwhile, BC Premier David Eby has refused to sign the pipeline agreement, citing environmental objections. It's a split, but not a collapse. And Carney, ever the economist, is treating the divergence as manageable friction within a broader national realignment. At the federal level, the One Canadian Economy Act, Bill C-5, is already being implemented. It creates a federal projects office to fast-track key national infrastructure, eliminates internal trade barriers between provinces, and offers incentives to shift export flows away from U.S. routes. Carney has said he expects the first round of infrastructure designations to be announced by Labor Day, but the trade pressure is intensifying. According to internal estimates shared with premiers in Huntsville, Trump's tariff plan would affect more than $35 billion in annual Canadian exports. That includes $14 billion in steel and aluminum, $23 billion in vehicles and parts, and over $6 billion in forestry products. Together, those industries employ more than 2.3 million Canadians. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is currently in Washington for what insiders describe as grim but ongoing negotiations. American trade representatives have reportedly offered a limited exemption package, but only if Canada agrees to restrict exports of certain goods and accept a 3-year renewal clause that would allow Washington to revisit tariffs unilaterally. Carney's response? A flat no. We are not going to sign something that weakens us long-term just to avoid pain short-term. The strategy now has 3 paths. In Scenario 1, Canada refuses to sign. Trump imposes tariffs. Canada retaliates immediately with duties on U.S. goods, targeting corn, dairy, pharmaceutical ingredients, and construction equipment. Public support for Carney surges. U.S. producers lobby for a quick rollback. In Scenario 2, the U.S. agrees to a short-term extension under pressure from G7 allies. Negotiations continue into the fall. Canada keeps its options open. In Scenario 3, Canada signs, but gives up critical leverage in other trade talks, including with Japan, the EU, and ASEAN economies. The risk? Canada avoids immediate tariffs, but is locked into an unbalanced framework that restricts its global alignment strategy. Carney has made it clear, Scenario 3 is off the table. The rhetoric is growing sharper, and the politics are turning. Public polling from Abacus shows that 64% of Canadians now support retaliatory tariffs if Trump follows through. Nearly half of respondents said they would support shifting federal resources away from the U.S. relationship and toward Asian or European markets, even if it meant short-term pain. Behind the scenes, that is already happening. Teck Resources has begun redirecting copper concentrate shipments away from the United States and into Asia. Cathode processing contracts are now being negotiated in South Korea and Japan. Steel output from Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie is being stockpiled for use in domestic infrastructure projects rather than cross-border sales. Trade flows are shifting, not in theory, in reality. Statistics Canada reports that non-US exports rose 24% in Q2, while US-bound shipments dropped 7%. That is the widest trade divergence in a decade. In interviews, Canadian CEOs are quietly saying what many have only whispered for years: the US is no longer a reliable partner. Labor unions are stepping in too. Unifor is lobbying for emergency wage support for sectors hit by tariffs, but also for investment credits to retrain workers into strategic sectors: EV battery materials, precision manufacturing, clean tech components. They're not just defending jobs, they're aligning with the transformation. And while Canada builds this alternative future, Trump is still issuing ultimatums. On July 24th, reports emerged that pharmaceutical goods may be next, potentially subject to a 200% tariff if no agreement is reached.
President Donald Trump floated the idea of imposing a 200% tariff on pharmaceutical imports into the U.S. on Tuesday.
Canadian health officials have begun preparing backup import pathways from Europe and India to avoid domestic shortages. The costs will be higher, but the political cost of dependence is now deemed worse. Meanwhile, the business community is holding its breath. Bay Street banks are modeling recession risk if a full trade rupture occurs. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce is accelerating its Indo-Pacific Export Readiness Roadmap, and a working group of provincial ministers is now meeting weekly to prepare for tariff fallout. Canada is not just waiting, it is planning, it is reconfiguring its trade posture, and it is doing so with clarity. This is no longer a reactive government, it is a government in motion. Carney's philosophy is clear. Canada cannot afford to be the junior partner anymore. The relationship with the United States is important, but it cannot be singular. Not when Washington is unstable, not when trade policy changes with a single tweet, not when 35% tariffs are used as bargaining chips. We are not desperate, Carney said again after his Huntsville meeting. We are deliberate, and we are building something better. It may take months, it may take years, but a new strategy is being written, not in Washington, in Ottawa, Vancouver, Halifax, and the town halls of every province in between. A new economic map, one that no longer assumes that all roads must lead through the White House. Let us know what you think in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe to Auto News and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest political economic updates.